Have you ever reached a moment in life where everything seemed to be going wrong at the same time? A season where no matter how hard you try, nothing seems to move forward. You pray, but the answers feel delayed. You work hard, but the results never appear. You wait, and wait, and wait. And slowly, a quiet question begins forming in the back of your mind. Has God forgotten about me? Maybe you never say that question out loud, but deep inside, you wonder why things have remained so difficult for so long. You look around and see other people moving forward. Opportunities appear in their lives. Doors open for them. Breakthroughs happen for them. But your situation seems frozen, like your life has been paused in a place you never planned to stay. Some people even begin to believe that their circumstances will never change. They start thinking that this difficult season is simply how their life will always be. But there is something important that many people do not realize about the way God works. Throughout history, many of the most powerful moments of change did not happen slowly. They happened suddenly. One moment, everything looked impossible. And the next moment, everything changed. In the Bible, we see this pattern again and again. Joseph spent years in slavery and prison. Day after day, nothing changed. There were no signs of improvement, no clear path out. But then one day, everything shifted. In a single moment, Joseph went from a prison cell to standing before the king of Egypt. His entire life changed in one day. The same pattern appears in many other stories. People endured long seasons of waiting, long seasons of confusion, long seasons where it seemed like nothing was happening. But when the time came, God turned their situation around faster than anyone expected. What took years of waiting was transformed in a single moment of breakthrough. This is something we often forget during difficult seasons. When we are in the middle of hardship, it feels like the situation will last forever. The pain feels permanent. The struggle feels endless. But what if the moment you are in right now is not the end of your story? What if it is the final chapter before God changes everything? Because the truth is, God often works behind the scenes long before the breakthrough appears. While you are waiting, He is preparing. While you feel stuck, He is arranging. While nothing seems to change on the surface, He is aligning people, timing, and opportunities in ways you cannot yet see. And when everything is ready, the change can happen suddenly. Not gradually, not slowly. Suddenly, doors open that were once impossible. Opportunities appear that you never imagined. Situations shift in ways you never expected. But before those moments happen, there are often signs. Quiet signals that God is preparing to turn your situation around. Signs that something is happening beneath the surface of your life. Signs that your season is beginning to shift. And many people miss these signs because they are too focused on the problem they are facing. They see the difficulty. They see the delay. They see the struggle. But they do not realize that these very moments may be part of the preparation for something greater. Because when God is about to change a situation, certain patterns begin to appear. The circumstances around you begin shifting. Your perspective begins changing. Unexpected things begin happening. At first, these signs may seem small, but together, they begin revealing something powerful. They reveal that the story is not over. They reveal that the waiting season has a purpose. And they reveal that the breakthrough you have been praying for may be closer than you think. If you have been feeling stuck, if you have been wondering whether your situation will ever change, if you have been waiting for God to move in your life, then this message may be exactly what you need to hear today. Because in this video, we are going to explore several powerful signs that God may be preparing to suddenly turn your situation around. Signs that your current season is about to change. Signs that the door you have been waiting for may be closer than it appears. And by the end of this message, you may begin to see your current situation through a completely different perspective. Because sometimes the moment that feels like the lowest point in your life is actually the moment right before God changes everything. The pattern God often uses before a sudden breakthrough. One of the most difficult things about seasons of waiting is that they rarely make sense while you are living through them. When life becomes hard, when progress seems to stop, when your prayers appear unanswered, it is easy to assume that nothing is happening. From the outside, it looks like your situation is completely stuck. But throughout Scripture and throughout many real-life testimonies, we see a pattern that appears again and again. Before God suddenly changes a situation, there is often a season that looks exactly the opposite of what people expect. Instead of immediate victory, there is waiting. Instead of clarity, there is confusion. Instead of progress, there is pressure. At first, these seasons can feel discouraging. People begin wondering why things are not moving forward. They question whether they misunderstood God's plan. They wonder if they made the wrong decision somewhere along the way. But the truth is that many of the greatest turnarounds in history were preceded by seasons that looked completely hopeless. In fact, the moment right before the breakthrough often looks like the worst part of the story. Think about how many powerful transformations follow this exact pattern. Before the dawn arrives, the night reaches its darkest point. Before a seed grows into something new, it must first be buried beneath the soil. Before the storm clears, the clouds gather their greatest intensity. These moments are not signs that the story is ending. They are often signs that something is about to change. And when we look at the stories recorded in the Bible, we see this pattern unfold repeatedly. People who were chosen for incredible purposes often went through long seasons where nothing seemed to be working. Joseph spent years in prison after being falsely accused. Imagine how confusing that season must have felt. He had dreams about his future, dreams that suggested his life would become something meaningful. Yet his reality looked completely different. Instead of leadership, he experienced betrayal. Instead of success, he experienced imprisonment. Day after day passed without any sign that his situation would improve. But then something happened that changed everything. In a single day, Joseph was brought from the prison to stand before Pharaoh. And suddenly, the man who had been forgotten in a prison cell was elevated to one of the highest positions in Egypt. His entire situation turned around almost instantly. What took years of waiting was transformed in a single moment. This same pattern appears in many other stories of faith. There are moments when everything appears to be going wrong. Moments when hope feels distant. Moments when people believe their opportunity is past. But those moments are often part of the preparation process. God is not only interested in changing circumstances. He is also shaping the person who will walk into the new season. Preparation often happens in hidden places. In quiet seasons. In moments where progress is not visible to others. During these times, something important is happening beneath the surface. Character is being formed. Faith is being strengthened. Wisdom is being developed. These are the things that prepare someone to handle the blessing that is coming. Because if the breakthrough arrived too early, the person might not yet be ready to carry the responsibility that comes with it. This is one of the reasons waiting seasons can be so important. They shape the foundation for what comes next. Imagine someone being given a powerful opportunity before they have the maturity to handle it. Without preparation, success can become overwhelming. But when God prepares the person first, the blessing becomes sustainable. The waiting season becomes the training ground. It is the place where patience grows. It is where resilience develops. It is where faith deepens in ways that would never happen during easy seasons. And when the moment finally arrives, the person is ready. They are no longer the same individual who first entered the difficult season. They have grown stronger, wiser, more grounded, more prepared for the next chapter of their life. This is why many of the greatest turnarounds seem to happen suddenly. From the outside, it looks like the change happened overnight. But in reality, the preparation was happening quietly for a long time. God was working behind the scenes, aligning the right timing, arranging the right people, opening the right opportunities. And when everything was finally ready, the door opened. This is important to remember if you are currently in a season where nothing seems to be changing. Just because you cannot see progress does not mean that nothing is happening. Just because the answer has not appeared yet does not mean it will never appear. Sometimes the breakthrough takes longer because the preparation is still unfolding. And when the moment finally arrives, it often happens faster than anyone expected. But before that sudden shift takes place, there are often signs that the season is about to change. Clues that something beneath the surface is beginning to move. Signals that God is preparing to turn the situation around. And one of the first signs often surprises many people. Because instead of things getting easier, the situation begins to look impossible. And that leads to the first sign. Why God allows difficult seasons before the breakthrough. One of the hardest questions people ask during a difficult season is simple but deeply emotional. Why would God allow this to happen? When life becomes overwhelming, when prayers seem unanswered, when progress feels impossible, it is natural to question the reason behind the struggle. People often assume that hardship means something has gone wrong. They believe that if God is truly guiding their life, the path should always be smooth. But when we look at the stories throughout Scripture, we see something very different. The people who eventually experienced the greatest breakthroughs often walked through some of the most challenging seasons first. Their struggles were not accidents. They were preparation. Because before God elevates someone, He often prepares them. And that preparation sometimes happens through difficulty. It is important to understand that God is not interested in simply giving people blessings. He is interested in shaping people who can carry those blessings. There is a difference between receiving something and being ready for it. Imagine someone being handed a position of great responsibility before they have the wisdom to handle it. The opportunity might seem like a blessing at first, but without the right character, the same opportunity could become overwhelming. This is why preparation is so important. Difficult seasons often develop qualities that comfortable seasons never produce. Patience grows when answers take time. Faith deepens when circumstances seem uncertain. Strength develops when challenges must be faced. These are the qualities that prepare someone for the moment when their situation finally changes. Without these qualities, the breakthrough might arrive, but it might not last. In many ways, the waiting season is where the foundation is built. It is the time when the roots grow deeper before the tree becomes visible. And this is something many people do not see while they are in the middle of the process. They focus on the frustration of waiting. They see the delay as something negative. But often, the delay is actually protection. God may be preventing someone from stepping into a season they are not yet ready for. He may be aligning events that must happen before the breakthrough appears. He may be shaping circumstances in ways that cannot yet be seen. Think about how many situations in life require precise timing. If something happens too early, it may fail. If it happens too late, the opportunity may be lost. But when the timing is right, everything aligns. This is why God's timing can sometimes feel mysterious. From our perspective, we see the waiting. But from God's perspective, He sees the entire picture. He sees the path ahead. He sees the people who will enter your life. He sees the opportunities that will appear. And He knows the exact moment when everything will come together. During the difficult season, it may feel like nothing is happening. But behind the scenes, countless details are being arranged. People are being placed in positions that will eventually intersect with your life. Doors are being prepared that will open at the right moment. Circumstances are shifting in ways that cannot yet be recognized. And when the timing finally arrives, the change may happen faster than anyone expects. What once seemed impossible begins to shift almost overnight. Opportunities appear that were never visible before. Situations that felt permanent suddenly begin to change. But there is another reason God sometimes allows difficult seasons before a breakthrough. These moments refine a person's heart. Challenges reveal what truly matters. They strip away distractions. They force people to confront their deepest fears and doubts. But in doing so, they also create space for growth. Many people discover their strongest faith during their hardest seasons. When everything else is uncertain, they learn to trust God more deeply. When human solutions fail, they begin relying on divine guidance. And this kind of faith becomes a powerful foundation for the future. Because when the breakthrough finally arrives, the person who receives it has already been transformed. They are no longer the same individual who first entered the difficult season. They are stronger, more resilient, more prepared to walk into the new chapter of their life. This is why the struggle often appears before the sudden turnaround. The preparation happens first. The transformation happens quietly. And then the moment arrives when everything begins to shift. But when that shift is approaching, there are often signs. Subtle signals that the season is beginning to change. Clues that the breakthrough may be closer than it appears. And the first sign often surprises people. Because before God turns a situation around, the situation may begin to look completely impossible. And that leads to the first sign. Sign number 1. When everything starts looking impossible. One of the most surprising patterns in spiritual life is this. Right before a breakthrough happens, things often appear completely impossible. Not difficult. Not complicated. Impossible. This moment can feel incredibly discouraging if you do not understand what is happening. Because from a human perspective, when a situation reaches its worst point, it feels like the end of the story. Doors close. Opportunities disappear. Resources run out. Time seems to work against you. Everything around you begins suggesting that the outcome you hoped for will never happen. But throughout Scripture, this exact moment often appears right before God intervenes. Again and again, the story reaches a place where human solutions no longer exist. And that is when God moves. Because sometimes God allows a situation to reach the point where human strength is no longer enough. Not to punish people, but to reveal that the breakthrough will come from Him. If the solution arrived too early, people might assume they solved the problem themselves. But when every natural option disappears, the only explanation left is divine intervention. This pattern appears in many of the most powerful biblical stories. Think about the moment when the Israelites stood at the edge of the Red Sea. Behind them was Pharaoh's army. In front of them was the sea. There was no escape route, no strategy, no logical way forward. From a human perspective, their situation was completely impossible. Yet that exact moment became the stage for one of the greatest miracles in history. The sea parted. A path appeared where none existed. And what once looked like certain defeat became an incredible deliverance. Notice something important about this story. The miracle did not happen when things looked manageable. It happened when the situation looked hopeless. This pattern is repeated in many moments of transformation. Sometimes God waits until the moment when the situation reaches its breaking point. Not because He enjoys seeing people struggle, but because that moment reveals the difference between human limitation and divine power. Many people experience something similar in their own lives. There are seasons when progress seems steady. Things move forward step by step. Plans unfold the way people expected. But then suddenly something changes. A challenge appears. A door closes. A setback happens that nobody predicted. And slowly, the situation becomes harder and harder to solve. At first, people try fixing it with their own solutions. They work harder. They search for answers. They try every possible option. But eventually they reach a point where nothing seems to work. That moment can feel frightening because it removes the illusion of control. People realize they cannot force the outcome they want. They cannot solve the problem through effort alone. And it is often in that moment, when control disappears, that faith becomes the most important. Because faith is not about trusting when everything makes sense. Faith is trusting when the path is unclear, when the solution is invisible, when the outcome feels uncertain. Many people give up during this stage. They assume the difficulty means their story is ending. But what they do not realize is that this moment often appears right before a turning point. Because when human solutions end, divine solutions begin. When people reach the limits of their strength, God reveals His. This is why the moment of impossibility can sometimes be the closest moment to a miracle. And if you are currently facing a situation that feels impossible, it may not be the end of your story. It may simply be the stage where God is about to move. But there is another sign that often appears before a sudden turnaround. And it is one that many people overlook. Because it does not always look dramatic. In fact, it often looks quiet, subtle, almost invisible. Before God changes a situation externally, He often begins changing something internally. Your thinking begins shifting. Your perspective begins transforming. Your faith begins growing in ways you never expected. And this internal change is often the signal that a new season is approaching. Because before the breakthrough appears in your circumstances, God prepares the person who will walk into it. And that leads to the next sign. Sign number 2, when your mindset and perspective begin to change. One of the clearest signs that God is preparing to turn your situation around does not always appear in your circumstances first. It appears in your mind. Before external change happens, internal transformation often begins. Your thinking shifts. Your perspective begins to evolve. The way you see your situation slowly starts changing. At first, this change may be subtle. You might not even notice it immediately. But over time, something inside you becomes different. The fear that once controlled your thoughts begins to lose its power. The anxiety that once kept you awake at night slowly starts fading. The hopelessness that once filled your mind begins to be replaced with a quiet sense of expectation. Nothing around you may have changed yet, but something within you has. And that internal shift is not random. It is often a sign that God is preparing you for what comes next. Because the truth is this: before God changes your situation, He often changes your perspective. Why? Because if your mindset stays the same, even a miracle may not produce lasting transformation. Many people pray for new opportunities, new seasons, and new blessings. But if their thinking remains stuck in fear, doubt, or insecurity, they may not be ready to handle what they asked for. This is why internal change often comes first. God begins preparing your mind to see things differently. Your thinking becomes clearer. Your focus becomes sharper. Your priorities begin to shift. Things that once seemed extremely important suddenly lose their significance. And things that once seemed distant suddenly feel meaningful. You begin understanding that your life is not defined by a single difficult season. You begin realizing that your story is still unfolding. And slowly, a deeper kind of confidence begins to grow. Not confidence based on circumstances, but confidence based on faith. This type of transformation can feel strange at first, because the problems may still exist. The obstacles may still be present. Yet inside you, something feels calmer, stronger, more grounded. You start realizing that your identity is not controlled by your current struggle. You begin understanding that the situation you are facing does not determine the future God has planned for you. And that realization changes how you walk through difficulty. Instead of reacting with fear, you begin responding with patience. Instead of assuming the worst, you begin expecting something better. Instead of feeling trapped by the present moment, you begin trusting that your story is still moving forward. This mindset shift is incredibly powerful, because how you think shapes how you move, and how you move shapes the opportunities that eventually appear. When people live in constant fear, they often hesitate when new doors open. They doubt their ability. They question whether they deserve the opportunity. They may even walk away from something that was meant for them. But when someone has been transformed internally, they approach life differently. They walk with greater clarity. They carry themselves with quiet strength. They recognize opportunities when they appear, and they step forward with courage. This is why internal preparation is so important before a breakthrough arrives. Because when the door finally opens, the person who walks through it must be ready. Ready emotionally, ready mentally, ready spiritually. And many of those qualities are developed during the season that once felt like delay. What looked like waiting was actually preparation. What looked like silence was actually transformation. What looked like stagnation was actually growth happening beneath the surface. This pattern appears repeatedly in Scripture. People who experienced sudden elevation often went through long seasons where their character was being refined. Their faith deepened. Their understanding matured. By the time their circumstances changed, they had already become different people. Stronger people. Wiser people. People capable of handling what was coming. And the same pattern often happens in our lives today. Before God shifts your external world, He may begin shifting your internal one. You start seeing situations differently. You begin responding to challenges with greater calm. You feel less controlled by the opinions of others. You feel less driven by fear. Instead, a quiet confidence begins forming. You begin trusting that your life is guided by something greater than the chaos around you. And that trust changes everything. Because when your mindset changes, your entire approach to life changes. You stop chasing validation from the wrong places. You stop forcing doors that were never meant for you. You stop believing that your future is limited by your past. Instead, you begin focusing on growth, on faith, on becoming the person you were meant to be. And as that transformation continues, something interesting often begins happening around you. Situations that once felt immovable start shifting. Unexpected opportunities appear. New connections form. Paths open that you never anticipated. And slowly, the external world begins catching up with the internal transformation that already happened within you. But before that full turnaround becomes visible, another sign often appears. And this one can be confusing if you do not recognize it. Because instead of things becoming easier immediately, pressure may suddenly increase. Challenges may intensify. Obstacles may appear stronger than before. But surprisingly, this moment is often another signal that something significant is about to change. And that leads to the next sign. Sign number 3, when the pressure suddenly increases. One of the most confusing moments in a difficult season is when things seem to get harder instead of easier. You may have been praying, growing, trying to stay faithful, trying to stay patient. You may even feel like your mindset has improved and your faith has grown stronger. But then suddenly, the pressure increases. New problems appear. Unexpected obstacles show up. Situations that were already difficult seem to intensify. At first, this can feel discouraging. Many people begin asking themselves a painful question. If I'm moving in the right direction, why is everything becoming more difficult? But throughout spiritual history, there is an interesting pattern that appears again and again. Right before a major breakthrough, the resistance often increases. Think about it like pressure building before a storm finally breaks, or like tension building before a door finally opens. The moment right before change can sometimes feel like the most intense part of the entire journey. This happens for several reasons. First, pressure often reveals strength that people did not know they had. When life is easy, it is difficult to measure how strong someone truly is. But when challenges increase, resilience begins to appear. People discover courage they did not realize existed within them. They discover patience they never thought they could have. They discover a deeper level of faith that only emerges when circumstances are uncertain. Pressure reveals what is inside a person. It exposes weaknesses that need to grow stronger. But it also reveals strength that was hidden beneath the surface. And this process is often part of preparation. Because when a breakthrough arrives, the person stepping into that new season must be capable of handling greater responsibility. Without strength, opportunity can become overwhelming. Without resilience, success can collapse under pressure. So sometimes the pressure that appears before the breakthrough is actually developing the strength required for the next level. But there is another reason pressure often increases before a major turnaround. Sometimes resistance appears when something important is about to change. In many areas of life, resistance shows up when progress is happening. Think about how a seed grows beneath the soil. Before the plant breaks through the surface, it pushes against the weight of the ground above it. The pressure does not stop the growth. The pressure is part of the process that strengthens the plant. The same thing can happen in our lives. When something significant is developing beneath the surface, resistance may increase. Situations that once felt manageable suddenly feel more intense. People may misunderstand you. Plans may face unexpected delays. Opportunities may seem just out of reach. But sometimes these moments are not signs that you are failing. Sometimes they are signs that something important is about to break through. Many people give up during this stage. They assume the increased pressure means the journey is going in the wrong direction. But if they had continued just a little longer, they might have seen the shift that was coming. History is filled with stories of people who were extremely close to a breakthrough, but stopped just before the turning point. They interpreted the pressure as defeat, when in reality, the pressure was the final stage before the breakthrough. This is why perseverance is so important during difficult seasons. Because sometimes the greatest transformation happens just beyond the moment when people feel like quitting. And if you are currently experiencing increased pressure, it may not mean you are losing ground. It may mean you are approaching a transition. The challenge is learning how to respond during this moment. Because pressure can push people in two different directions. It can cause someone to retreat into fear, or it can strengthen someone's determination to keep moving forward. The people who eventually experience breakthroughs are often the ones who refuse to surrender when the pressure increases. They continue trusting even when circumstances become uncertain. They continue believing even when results are not visible yet. They continue moving forward even when the path feels difficult. And that perseverance often places them exactly where they need to be when the moment of change finally arrives. But there is another sign that frequently appears before God turns a situation around. And this sign can feel surprising, because it often involves people entering or leaving your life. Relationships begin shifting. Certain connections grow stronger. Other connections begin fading. New individuals appear at unexpected moments. And sometimes these changes are not coincidences. They are part of the alignment that prepares the next season of your life. And that leads to the next sign. Sign number 4. When God starts repositioning people around you. One of the most overlooked signs that a major shift is approaching in your life is when the people around you begin to change. Sometimes the change is subtle. A conversation that unexpectedly opens a new perspective. A connection that suddenly becomes important. Someone new entering your life at exactly the moment you needed guidance. Other times the change feels more dramatic. Certain relationships begin to fade. People you once spent a lot of time with seem to drift away. Conversations that once felt natural start feeling different. And this can feel confusing, because humans naturally become attached to familiar relationships. We like stability. We like consistency. We like knowing who is part of our daily lives. But one thing many people eventually realize is this. Every season of life often comes with a different set of people. Some individuals walk with you during the beginning of your journey. Others appear during moments of growth. And others arrive when you are stepping into something completely new. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some connections are meant to teach you something. Some are meant to support you through a difficult season. And some are meant to help guide you toward the next chapter of your life. When God begins shifting your life direction, He sometimes also begins repositioning the people around you. Why? Because the environment surrounding you plays a powerful role in shaping your future. The people you spend time with influence your mindset. They influence your decisions. They influence the way you see yourself and your potential. If you are surrounded by people who constantly doubt you, it becomes harder to believe in what is possible. If you are surrounded by negativity, fear can begin to grow. But when God is preparing someone for a new season, He often begins placing the right voices into their life. People who challenge them to grow. People who speak encouragement instead of doubt. People who recognize potential that others may have overlooked. Sometimes these individuals appear in unexpected ways. A mentor, a friend, a conversation that changes how you think, a connection that opens doors you never imagined. At the same time, certain relationships may begin to change or fade. And while that can feel painful, it is not always negative. Sometimes God removes people who no longer align with the direction your life is moving. Not because those individuals are bad, but because your paths are simply going in different directions. Growth sometimes requires new environments, new influences, new conversations. And when these changes begin happening, it can feel like your life is being rearranged. Because in many ways, it is. Think about how many opportunities in life come through people. A job opportunity, a new idea, a partnership, a piece of wisdom that changes how you approach the future. Many breakthroughs happen because the right connection appears at the right moment. This is why God often works through relationships when He is preparing a sudden turnaround. The right person may appear with the right insight, the right encouragement, or the right opportunity, and what once seemed impossible suddenly begins to move forward. But if the wrong influences remained in your life, those opportunities might never be recognized. Or worse, you might have doubted yourself enough to walk away from them. This is why relational shifts can be a powerful sign that something is changing. When God is preparing a new chapter, He often aligns the right people to walk with you into it. And sometimes those alignments happen quietly. A conversation here, a meeting there, a moment of guidance that seems small at first. But later you realize that those moments were not random. They were part of a larger plan unfolding in your life. And when the breakthrough finally happens, you often look back and realize how perfectly everything was arranged. The right people appeared. The right doors opened. The right timing came together. And what once felt like chaos suddenly makes sense. But there is one more powerful sign that often appears before God suddenly turns a situation around. And this sign is deeply spiritual. It is not always visible to others, but the person experiencing it feels it clearly. Because before the breakthrough arrives externally, a deep sense of peace often begins forming internally, a quiet assurance that something is about to change. And that leads to the final sign. Sign number 5, when God gives you unexplainable peace before the breakthrough. There is a moment that often appears before a major turning point in life. It is quiet, subtle, almost invisible to the outside world. Yet for the person experiencing it, it can feel incredibly powerful. This moment is when a deep and unexpected peace begins to appear in your heart. What makes this peace unusual is that your circumstances may not have changed yet. The problems may still exist. The challenges may still be present. The answers you have been waiting for may not have arrived. But somehow, despite everything around you, something inside you feels calm. You begin feeling less anxious about the future, less controlled by fear, less overwhelmed by uncertainty. Instead, a quiet confidence begins forming within you, a sense that things are going to work out, even if you do not yet understand how. This kind of peace does not come from human logic. It comes from something deeper. Many people describe it as a spiritual reassurance, a moment when they feel that God is guiding their life, even though the path ahead is still unfolding. This type of peace often appears after a long season of struggle, a season where you have prayed, waited, questioned, and searched for answers. At the beginning of the journey, the uncertainty may have felt overwhelming. You may have tried to control every outcome. You may have worried about every possible scenario. But over time, something inside you begins to shift. The need to control everything begins fading. You start realizing that your life is not entirely in your hands. And surprisingly, that realization brings freedom. Instead of trying to force the future, you begin trusting the process. Instead of fearing every unknown possibility, you begin believing that God is working behind the scenes. And that trust produces peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from having all the answers, but the kind that comes from believing you are being guided. This moment can feel almost mysterious, because from the outside, nothing appears different. But internally, everything feels different. You begin responding to situations with calm instead of panic. You begin speaking with confidence instead of doubt. You begin walking forward with patience instead of fear. And this shift in your inner world can be a powerful signal that your season is about to change. Because often, God prepares your heart before He changes your circumstances. If the breakthrough arrived while you were still filled with fear and anxiety, it might not bring the peace you expected. But when your heart has already been transformed, the breakthrough becomes something you can truly receive. Many people who experience sudden life changes later look back and remember this moment. They remember the time when they suddenly felt calm about the future, even though they had no visible reason to feel that way. They remember feeling a quiet certainty that something was about to happen. And then, not long after, their situation began changing. Opportunities appeared. Doors opened. Problems that once felt permanent suddenly began resolving. It was as if the peace had arrived before the miracle. This pattern appears throughout many spiritual journeys. Because God often strengthens a person's faith internally before revealing the external answer. Think about it this way. If you knew a storm was about to end, you would feel calm even before the clouds disappeared. You would not panic about the rain because you would know that sunlight is coming. In the same way, this deep peace can feel like an inner signal that the storm is nearing its end. And that peace can give you the strength to keep moving forward until the breakthrough appears. But it is important to understand something about these moments. Peace does not mean the journey suddenly becomes easy. There may still be obstacles. There may still be waiting. But the difference is that you no longer feel defeated by those challenges. Instead, you carry a quiet belief that your story is moving towards something better. And that belief changes how you walk through the final stage of the journey. You begin showing up differently. You speak differently. You think differently. You approach life with hope instead of exhaustion. And often, that new mindset places you exactly where you need to be when the moment of change arrives. Because breakthroughs do not always happen in isolation. They happen when preparation, timing, opportunity, and faith all come together. And when that alignment happens, things can shift faster than you ever imagined. Situations that felt stuck for years can change in a matter of days. Opportunities that once seemed impossible suddenly become real. Paths that once looked blocked begin opening. And you realize that the waiting season was never wasted. It was preparing you, strengthening you, positioning you, so that when the moment of change arrived, you were ready to step into it. And if you are experiencing that quiet peace right now, even while your situation still looks uncertain, it may be a sign that something powerful is already in motion. It may be a signal that your story is closer to turning around than you think. Because often, before God changes what is happening around you, He changes what is happening within you. And when that internal transformation is complete, the external breakthrough is never far behind. Your story is not over. The turnaround can happen suddenly. If there is one truth that appears again and again throughout spiritual history, it is this. God can change a situation faster than anyone expects. People often assume that because something has been difficult for a long time, it will always remain that way. When a struggle lasts for months, or even years, it is easy to believe that nothing will ever change. But many of the most powerful turning points in life happen suddenly. A door opens that no one expected. An opportunity appears that completely shifts the direction of someone's future. A situation that once felt impossible begins to resolve faster than anyone imagined. What seemed permanent begins to move. What once looked hopeless suddenly becomes full of possibility. This is why seasons of waiting should never be mistaken for the end of the story. Sometimes they are simply the preparation stage before something new begins. Throughout this message, we explored several signs that often appear before a sudden turnaround. Moments that may seem confusing while you are experiencing them, but later reveal that something important was developing. The first sign is when situations begin looking completely impossible. Not just difficult, but truly beyond human solutions. These moments can feel terrifying at first. But many of the greatest breakthroughs happen exactly when human strength reaches its limit, because that is when divine power becomes visible. The second sign is when your mindset begins changing. Even before circumstances shift, your perspective transforms. Fear begins losing its control over your thoughts. Hope begins replacing doubt. Your confidence begins coming from faith rather than from what you see around you. That internal change is often the beginning of something new. The third sign is when pressure increases. Instead of things becoming easier, challenges intensify. But pressure often strengthens the person who will step into the next season. It reveals resilience. It builds endurance. And it prepares someone to handle the opportunities that are coming. The fourth sign is when relationships begin shifting. New people appear. Old connections change. God sometimes aligns the right voices, the right encouragement, and the right opportunities through the people who enter your life. These moments are rarely random. They are often part of the preparation for what comes next. And finally, the fifth sign is when a deep and unexpected peace begins forming inside you. Even before the breakthrough appears externally, your heart begins feeling calm. You sense that something is changing. You feel guided, even though you do not yet know what the future holds. This kind of peace is powerful, because it gives you the strength to keep moving forward during the final stage of the journey. And sometimes that stage is the closest moment to the breakthrough. The truth is, many people give up just before their situation begins changing. They assume the waiting means nothing will happen. They interpret the pressure as failure. They mistake preparation for defeat. But if they had continued just a little longer, they might have seen the door that was about to open. Your current season does not define your final outcome. Your struggle does not cancel your purpose. Your waiting does not mean your story has stopped moving forward. In many cases, the turnaround happens when people least expect it. So if you recognize some of these signs in your own life, if you have felt the pressure, if your mindset has been shifting, if certain relationships are changing, if a quiet peace has begun forming within you, do not lose hope, because it may mean that something powerful is already in motion. Your breakthrough may be closer than it appears. The door that changes everything may already be forming. The opportunity that shifts your entire direction may already be on its way. And when that moment arrives, you may look back and realize that every difficult step along the journey was preparing you for it. Your story is still unfolding. Your purpose is still alive. And the turnaround you have been waiting for can happen in a moment. So keep moving forward. Keep believing. And keep trusting that even in seasons of uncertainty, God is still working behind the scenes.